Hello and welcome back, and today we want to look at another video about unofficial memory upgrades, and by that of course what I mean is utilising memory that isn't technically supported by the brands. Now, unlike a lot of the videos I've done about Synology when I've talked about this, when Synology are incredibly strict about the memory modules you utilise where you have to use their memory, today we're looking at a QNAP, and we're looking at the QNAP TS-873A. Now, QNAP is a brand that, although they do heavily endorse their own memory, it has to be said that they do support some third-party modules. On top of that, they will say that if you maintain the old memory and any errors that happen with their hardware do not relate to the memory, there is a way round. They do have supported and unsupported configurations. There's still a grey area. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but what I will say is a lot of you, when you're looking at a QNAP solution, are slightly less worried about using non-QNAP branded memory. Now, this device, once again, the 873A, today's video represents all three of them, the 4-bay, the 6-bay and the 8-bay, the 473A, 673A and 873A. They've got the same chipset, same lanes, so although we're utilising this device today, hopefully the thumbnail has basically said I'm covering the lot. But to make up for that, to make it seem like I'm just doing a bit of a cop-out and trying to cover a lot of NASs at once, this device, I'm going to be doing 3 different memory tests today. So it's got 8 gig of DDR4 non-ECC 2400 MHz memory inside. I've got 2 VMs inside. I've already set the device up with QTS. It's ready to rock. Now, obviously, I've disconnected it. First test we're going to do is we're going to use some ECC memory, 8 gig of DDR4 ECC memory, 2400 MHz, but the hope is that this NAS is going to be able to see that ECC memory inside. So that's the first test that we're going to be running, DDR4 with a SODIMM inside this to make sure that the QTS can see the ECC memory. Next, then we're going to power it down again. Then we're going to be using Crucial, and we're going to install 2 Crucial 16 gig DDR4 SODIMM sticks, and these are 2666 megahertz sticks. And what we want to see is 1, can the system see them, and 2, can we assign those memory values to the 2 VMs inside. Lastly, we're going to be utilising some Kingston memory, and this is where things, I think, get, quote, interesting. I know interesting is relative. And that is these 2 32 gig modules. These are non-ECC, 32 gig in each stick. And this system is one of the very few that utilise that Ryzen processor, the V1500B, that say it supports 64 gig of memory. So we want to test that today by installing 64 gig inside and assigning that to VM. We want to see that the system can not only see the 64 gig, but it can assign it appropriately. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the back of the chassis. This system's memory modules are inside. So I've got to remove the 3 screws that hold on the top of the chassis. I'm going to remove the module that's inside. If I had to have a guess, now in QNAP it's either going to be Samsung memory or it's going to be ADATA memory. Let's have a look here. Removed that, and of course while we set it up we're going to make our way to the screen here on my laptop. Let's remove the lid. There is our chassis lid, which I didn't remove in the smoothest fashion. We turn it around. As you can see, this is a setup. I've already installed some M2 NVMe's in there for some other testing. If we bring that closer to camera, you can see the memories there on that side of the screen. This is not a light box, people. So let's remove that memory module, and in fact I was wrong. This is a Kingston module. This is a Kingston 2400 megahertz memory module there. Model ID for those that care. CBD26D4S9S1ME. I know, catchy name, right? Let's pop that over there. And so the first test is utilising the ECC memory. We want to see whether this system will play ball with the error code correction memory. Now, for those that aren't aware, ECC memory, in its most basic form, creates a little blueprint, a little checksum at the beginning of data going through the memory, and then at the end it compares what it goes out the other end of the memory, and if anything's changed, bit rot, errors, anything like that, it then heals those files. Enterprise level and data center utilities take huge advantage of this kind of technology, and Although on this level it might seem like a little bit of overkill, a lot of SMB users like the idea that they can take advantage of this. Anyway, so we've got the ECC memory installed. So let's go ahead, put the lid back on, and get this device set up, powered on, and make our way into QTS. I'll see you in a sec. Right, so QTS has loaded up just like we wanted it to with the 8GB DDR4 ECC module inside. We've made our way into the system status, and from here we can see that the 8GB of memory is visible. 6GB of free memory because the system is utilizing some of it. And we can see the memory slot that's even inside InnoDisk, registered as the name there. If we make our way in, it's all visible there. There's the 8GB module all in one, and there is our CPU. Now, I've gone into the resource monitor. Indeed, the resource monitor still allows us to see the memory being utilized there. We can go break it down quite a lot and go into the memory utilization there as well. We'll try and keep that on screen as much as possible during this video. And of course, there is the question of those virtual machines that we discussed. We've got two VMs inside here. They are Windows 10 VMs, so I've already set them up before. They utilize 1 core of the Ryzen quad-core processor and 2GB of memory. We're just going to let it use those 2GB for now. So for now, let's kick off and start our VMs. So we've got one that's going to be powering up now. And then we're going to let the second VM power up as well. Let that carry on and do its thing. We'll open that in a separate window too. And we're going to start our second VM now as well. So go ahead and let that VM begin. And we'll allow that to run in the second virtualization window. So there's our VM1 and VM2 there. So we'll let those set up and do their thing in the background there. And while they boot, because do bear in mind we are running a Windows 10 VM here, even if this was a desktop PC, you would never run a PC of this architecture on a single core with just 2GB of memory running on a mechanical hard drive. So do bear in mind that these are not going to be the fastest VMs in the book. It's also worth highlighting that the Ryzen CPU, we've got to talk a little bit about the capabilities of that processor as well. But for now, let's log in to our virtual machine here. And again, we are going to get quite tremendous slowdown here. That is kind of unavoidable. And we have to use that silly password that we've been utilizing before. Let's get that right there. Password there. And we're logging into our first VM, and we'll log into the second VM here. Once again, logging in with that password. Pretty sure I typed way too fast there for it to register. We'll go ahead and log that in there. And there it is. It's going to be running our VM. As we can see, it's a Windows 10 VM. We go back to Virtualization Station. We can have some idea about how much of the hardware architecture has been utilized during this. And both of these, we can go ahead, open up the bottom and open the Task Manager on each of these. Because that's going to be interesting to see if we can actually see the 2GB of memory on those ECC modules. It's very tough to show ECC memory modules working. So for now, we're just going to have to appreciate the fact that it is indeed accepting the memory module we put inside, but it would be very tough to display the QNAP NAS system actually utilizing ECC without purposefully trying to create data corruptions there. And again, I do think right now we're having the network throttling a little bit there, but we can see right now the memory is, we're using 1GB of memory for Windows. The CPU obviously being overused, something chronic. If we make our way into the other VM here, exactly the same thing going on here. Different VMs entirely, both running simultaneously from the same system, and there with all of that happening. So I think for now that's enough to be going on with on the ECC memory. So what we're going to do now is shut down each of these respective VMs in one go, and then we're going to install the two 16GB crucial modules inside this system, and then see if we assign lots more memory to those VMs that the system can still take advantage of crucial memory inside. So while we allow those to shut down, as soon as these two lights turn grey, then I'm going to be able to go straight in and power down the device completely. So we'll let that shut down. I'm not going to have to let you guys hang around and wait. We've got one VM shut down. The other one is now shut down as well. So we can go ahead and shut down our NAS. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and install that crucial memory for us, so we can go ahead and test if it can use the available 32GB. Let's fast forward. Okay, so we've booted the device right back up again, and as you can see, it has recognized that 32 gig of memory. If we go into the hardware information there, we can see that it's listed the two 16 gig memory modules there. In each of them, the crucial 16 gig DDR4 2666 megahertz non-ECC memory. No, what a mouthful. So what we're going to do is, just like we've done before, we're going to get that lovely resource monitor up there. We're going to focus very heavily there on the memory, and while we're doing that, we're going to open up the Virtualization Station application. We're going to get those VMs ready, and with those VMs we're going to go ahead and edit them very quickly and increase the baseline memory on each of them. So at the moment they're both showing 2 gig of memory. Let's upgrade that to 12 gig nice and easily there. Same goes for the other VM2. So if we switch into the other VM, we'll increase that from 2 to 12 gigabytes of memory. A number of you may wonder why we would go with 12 gig of memory and not even higher, given that we've got 32 to play with. It's because I want to make sure there's enough for the system to be utilizing and running nice and smoothly there. So because I want to make sure there isn't any system or NAS bottleneck there in the background. So we're going to go ahead and start off each of those VMs. We're going to wait until we see that one change into something more usable. So we're going to go into this one. And once again, we're going to start both of those VMs. Right now, both of those are the windows we utilized earlier that show the suspended VM. So as they both boot up, we can hopefully be able to see that these will change. They'll still need a little bit more time for us to go into them there. Actually come out of them and open them up as brand new windows. Might make a lot more sense. And we'll allow both of those VMs to start their boot operation. So while it's doing that there, once again, it's worth talking about that Ryzen processor that's inside. Because one of the interesting things about this product series is not only that QNAP lets this system arrive without ECC memory, which does make things a little bit more cost effective, even though it does support ECC. But the interesting thing is, both all the websites I've been to, CPU Monkey, going to Wikichip and a few other resources that list this processor, because it's a lesser listed one, released back in the end of 2018, they list it as a maximum memory of 32 gigabytes. Same goes over here, and Ryzen's own pages list it as that. However, we are also going to look at upgrading it to 64 gig in our next test, something that QNAP say this system can do. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the system reacts to this larger amount of memory inside. Have a look inside there. We're looking at the different VMs there. Open that bad boy up. And of course we're going to put in our password, log in. Let's have a look. That one should bring up our password select screen shortly. Again, we are kind of running on a Wi-Fi connection down here, as you can see from the bottom right of the screen, and perhaps that's not really sufficient for what we're trying to do when we're trying to send data up and down in a number of different ways on the system. But as we can see there, straight into the memory monitor there, it's carrying on from where we left off. Let's have a look, go back in. And again, we are using OBS for this, so I know there is going to be times while using OBS to record these with my own GPU, taking a bit of a battering throughout the course of these tests that will play its part. But as you can see, the memory utilization there, it is showing the 12 gig. If we make our way into this one, we're able to see that 12 gig there ready and available. Obviously, the CPU is getting absolutely hammered, but still, nevertheless, it is still ready and available there. If we go into the resource monitor on the QNAP, we can see there the buffer, the cache, the available memory, all of it seemingly utilizing all 32 gig of memory. Something we fully expected, if I'm perfectly honest. We knew this was going to support up to 32. This system and its CPU have already shown that they can run 32 gig of memory. That Ryzen we've used in several systems already. Let's shut down these VMs as we get ready for the final test. So we'll go ahead there, shut that down. And it's worth highlighting again that the memory we're using in our first test is this module here. Available, you've got the Amazon link here, of course, but there are other websites, of course. There should be links in the description too. That is the model ID, so always double check when buying memory for your NAS. Two things. One, always double check the model ID is correct, because although the pages on a lot of these sites, including Amazon, won't change the actual URL, the content of the URL can change. So always double check that it's the right model, and always double check that it is dual rank or double rank or DR. This is because It allows more chips on the PCB on either side and allows each one of those chips to have lesser amount of memory on them, thereby allowing it to be much more evenly spread across the whole PCB, which is far better for the system to handle rather than larger cells of memory on module for the CPU to have to handle with, sometimes exceeding what it can handle on the channels. After these two, these should be shutting down now. They both shut down. Let's go back into, they've all shut down there, so let's shut down the QNAP. And we're going to reboot it in a moment, utilizing the Kingston 2 32 gig modules. Now that is these modules right here. Although they are lesser available on a number of sites, it took me a little while to find somewhere to buy them. And although they are available intermittently on Amazon, always check if they're there if you want to get, you know, a rather competitive price. Let's be realistic. I was able to get them in the end directly from Kingston. And Kingston there, and as you can see, they are dual rank memory 2R. And they are 32 gig single modules. And that is the two sticks that we're going to be putting inside our QNAP. But for now, I'm going to let this system shut down. I'm going to fast forward now to after me installing the two 32 gig module to show you guys, one, are they visible? Two, can they be assigned to the VM? Let's fast forward. And once again, we are back on the desktop here. We've rebooted the system and unsurprisingly, boom, there we are. Two 32 gig modules in one in each slot, giving us a total of 64 gig of memory in the hardware information. There is both of our Kingston modules there, all perfectly visible. If we make our way into the resource monitor, we'll be able to see there we've got the memory utilization at the top right. But of course, we want to take a good old look, nice precise look at memory being utilized there. And finally, now for the third time, straight into Virtualization Station, we want to go ahead and edit those VMs, this time to be even beefier than before. Let's give them, should we say 26 gig each? Let's be generous, shall we? Let's have a look. Do you know what? Let's go with 28 gig just for the hell of it. Let's have a look there and put 28 gig of memory in each of these VMs. An obscene amount of memory, which I'm sure will be absolutely fine. It will see it, and we will be doing a test very soon where we start to look at these VMs and running a pass mark inside each of them. In a follow-up video, we're doing that with a few other brands as well to show the utilization of that memory. But there you go, one core 28 gig, one core 28 gig. Let's go ahead and kickstart these VMs. I'm going to wait till that one reaches at least a DOS screen, and then we'll go ahead and boot the second VM there. As you can see, we're going to run them both. If we look at the resource monitor, we're almost certainly suddenly going to see an enormous jump in used memory as the system suddenly garners and grabs the available memory inside those two Kingston modules there for each of those VMs gradually over time as each of them boots. Let's run up and open up both of these windows individually. So we can go for it there. And as you can see, it's slowly but surely swallowing them all up in terms of availability as it goes through each of them. We are using memory swapping, but we're going to allow them both to boot all the way through to the desktop there. Again, still going to be slow. We're running a single core instance of Windows 10, but they're still booting quite quickly indeed there in the background. Still nice to have just absolutely piles of memory to play with. It's just a shame that we're bottlenecking ourselves with a single core there just for the sake of keeping things as even as possible. And they're both getting through to the boot stages there. We'll have a look, the memory utilization and the grabbing of it all happening in real time there. And again, we can go into the processes as well while it does all that in the background. If we list these by the most consuming memory process, almost certainly, as you can see, Virtualization Station is slowly but surely absolutely swallowing those up. There's our individual memory instances all taking care of that in the background there. Let's go back to memory, go back into our VMs, and once again, just for the final time, we're going to make our way into the task manager there, and each of them there is 28 gig of memory, only 6% of it being utilized by the VM. Obviously the CPU is going absolutely bananas there. And if we make our way into the other instance here, it's going to open up the task manager for us, head inside, and boom, 28 gig of available memory with only 1.6 being utilized. And there you go, there is showing that the 64 gig modules are being seen by the main system. We will be doing some more extensive VM testing on these systems to show the utilization of that, because although we could run things like surveillance or lots of VMs to occupy the bulk of that 64 gig of memory, it is worth remembering that although it might show the memory being utilized, however, it's going to be very hard to actually pin down the individual gigabytes of memory being visibly used by each system. But I'm going to wrap things up here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and found it helpful about buying the memory for your 73A series NAS. We'll of course be running even more tests very soon, not just on Ryzen CPU NASs, but we've got some interesting stuff coming up on Celeron as well. But otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe to learn more, and there are links in the description to NAS Compares and a whole series of articles on memory upgrades for your NAS, as well as links to the products we've discussed today. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.